All right, welcome to the presentation about SEO. My name is John Conrad. I'm the Director of Engineering Product Management for what we call traffic at eBay. And traffic consists of all those things that eBay does on behalf of its sellers to bring people to the site. What we're going to focus on today mostly is SEO. So one of the things that when I got the opportunity to give this talk, I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about some of the ways that eBay is unique. This is not going to be a traditional sort of SEO talk that maybe you've heard from other places, or if you have like SEO for dummies, things like that. You're going to hear some things that are unusual, a little different, and part of that's because of the unique environment we live in at eBay. So when I think of eBay, I think about this massive, gigantic amount of inventory of items. eBay receives about 10 million new items every day. And about 10 million items every day move off of the site. Either they sold or the listing ended. That's a massive amount of churn. So if you think about it, just kind of picture it as a great big port. There's millions and millions of items moving through the system. Half of our inventory, it closes or is sold within 7 days of it being listed. So that's a gigantic amount of churn. But eBay is also unusual when people think of it as a store, and this is where like my conversations with my grandma get confusing. eBay, people think of as a giant store, but we don't have any warehouses. We don't have any inventory. And that also means we don't have any buyers. So a normal store, you've got buyers, and you go to them and you say, hey, we think the hot product for Christmas is going to be Juggle Me Elmo, and how many of those can you get us and for what price? And the buyer goes and works on this usually in like June and July, and they come back and they say, okay, in November we're going to have 1 million Juggle Me Elmos, and this is the price we got it at. But at eBay, I don't know any of that stuff. I don't know what inventory I'm going to have tomorrow. And that's a complicated problem for SEO. Trying to know, what items we can push, how do we want to interact with the search engines, what our RSS feeds might be, is really hard when you don't know what's coming tomorrow. But eBay also has lots of advantages. So, first of all, eBay's got a massive amount of traffic. And we're one of the most popular websites in the world. In many countries, we're the most popular website in that country, or at least in the very top. And so with this massive amount of traffic, I can do great things. There's some things in SEO that you can't measure unless you have a massive amount of traffic. If you have a reasonable website, or maybe you have a blog and you're trying to figure out what's going on with SEO, or what's the trend, or those kinds of things, you probably don't have enough traffic to see some of the subtle signals that these great big search engines are sending. When Google announces that, say, they've got a new algorithm, I've probably already seen the effect of that algorithm because Google tests it. And they don't necessarily test it in the US. They might pick a small country, they might test it there. And so I can see, because I have enough traffic in all these little countries, I can start to see that, okay, something's up. So that's really a blessing. Another great thing about eBay, or an advantage that we have, is that we've had a lot of traffic for a very long time. We were one of the first e-commerce sites. So we don't just, we're not Johnny-come-lately. We don't have a little bit of data since we launched in June. We've got this massive amount of data from way back before Google even existed. That's a real advantage. So I can look for long-term trends. I can see, what are the things we were doing before. And there's certain advantages that come to a site just because of age. One of those being trust. So, the big search engines, they think about eBay because, well, we've been here for a long time and we're a successful site. When you think about it, so we've got like 10 million new items every day. We've got all these millions and millions and millions of people coming to the site all the time. We've got, many different country sites. It's very, very complicated. Everybody's clicking and they're buying and prices are going up and prices are going down. It's this crazy busy site. Tons and tons and tons of data. One of the advantages that eBay has is that we've been dealing with this kind of load for a very long time. And so we have the systems and capacity to deal with this complexity. It's crazy complicated. When you think about eBay, realize that we basically have no static pages. Of the millions and millions of pages we have, none of them are the same moment by moment. And so the linking between the pages and the paths between the pages are always changing. That's very complicated. And the directions that people go and the things that they do, of course, that's always changing as well. One of the things that fascinates me is that when I look at something that works really well in the US, and then I say, okay, let's release it in Germany, it's unpredictable what's going to happen. Germans buy things in a much different way than Americans. And if I didn't have the systems and the capacity to store all that data and process that data and study that data, I'd never have a chance at even figuring out how Germans are different than Americans in the way they use eBay. Okay. Another great advantage that eBay has, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started, is our sellers. Does anybody know what this is? All right. That's an Edison gramophone. So about a year ago, I had an opportunity to be on a panel. I was kind of the host for a panel. And one of the guys on the panel was this great guy. He's a retired engineer, and he's really passionate about Edison gramophones. In fact, he's so passionate and so knowledgeable, he's literally the guy that wrote the book about Edison gramophones. There's only one book in the world, and he wrote it. And he owns every model of Edison gramophone ever released. In fact, he told me when we were hanging out together that day that the British Museum had called him that morning with a question about one of their Edison gramophones. I mean, this is a guy that, he's the guy. So as I was talking to him about all this stuff, I'm like, hey, how do you spend your day? And he said, well, you know, I do all this stuff in the morning, and then I spend about 3 hours every night on eBay. And I said, well, what do you do? And he says, well, I go through all of the listings for Edison gramophones, and I look at how did they describe it, what is the price they're asking, the pictures, and usually people have got stuff that's wrong. You know the old comic? I love this comic that the wife is calling the husband to bed. She's like, honey, come to bed. And he says, no, somebody's wrong on the internet. You know, and he's going to stay up all night and fix it. So that stuff drives him crazy because he's so passionate about these gramophones. And so I said, so what do you do? And he says, well, I rewrite people's listings. I said, seriously? He's like, yeah. What I'll do, I'll contact the seller and I'll say, you know, you're listing it this way and you're describing it not quite right. Because that's actually a mahogany, blah, 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 not an oak, blah, blah, blah. And it's actually the 1918 version. You know, he'll walk them all through. He says, would you mind if I just rewrote the listing for you? And he doesn't charge anybody anything. Isn't that beautiful? He's this curator, and we have lots and lots of people like this. I mean, if you look at eBay, you're going to find people that are the world's experts at this kind of stuff. And they're super passionate about it. So that's a real advantage that eBay enjoys. Okay, so how is SEO at eBay different? One of the big things, all right, so let's imagine that you were at Stanford University and you happen to come across this paper that was written by one of the Stanford professors where he was studying journal articles, you know, scientific journals. And he decided to look at how journal articles refer to each other. Do you remember, you know, like when you're like 7th grade, you had to write that research paper and you had to have the citations all correct and blah, blah, blah. It's maybe the last time you ever looked at citations, but this guy wanted to study these. And so he got all these journal articles and all their citations, and so now we've got a document that's linking to another document. And he says, oh, this new document that's linking to this document is saying that I value that document. There's something good about it. Maybe it's accurate, maybe it's correct, maybe it's fundamental. And so he took all the journal articles he could find, and he took all those links between everything, and he made this gigantic graph. It looked like a net, I suppose. And it said, this document here is super valuable because all of these other journal articles think it's valuable. And he called the algorithm PageRank. Now, if you had read that and you'd noticed that, gee, that sounds like the internet, that sounds like web pages, you could have built Google, because that's basically all that Larry and Sergey did. They found this thing and they're like, wow, we could do this with web pages. All we have to do is make a backup copy of the internet and find all the links between all the pages and follow them all, right? So that's PageRank. And that's why Google's got a whole lot of computers. So PageRank is super important for SEO. If you go read one of these SEO for Dummies books, they'll talk about PageRank. And what does it mean? PageRank means that you've got a link from this page to this page, and because there's a link, there's a link you can click on. This page thinks that that page is important, right? That's a basic part of the internet. So think about eBay. A crawler from one of the search engines has to find the page, follow the link, and then calculate PageRank. And crawlers aren't super fast. So when you've got 10 million new pages every day, and you got 10 million pages disappearing every day, and half of all your pages turn over in 7 days, does the crawler have a prayer? No, the crawler doesn't even have a chance. I mean, the crawler is never going to be able to discover all these pages, especially naively. And so we provide some things, like we provide a thing called a sitemap that says, here are all of our pages. And so every day, there's this new document that says, here's 10 million new pages. Good luck, Google, or any other search engine. So, but you can see that because the crawlers can't make those crawls fast enough, interlinking within eBay actually has limited value. Well, that's like a core tenet of SEO. And so it's a big problem for us to figure out. Very cool problem. All right. So you need to think of eBay as sort of like a store, but a store that changes as fast as a stock ticker. A little known fact about eBay is that we actually process more transactions than NASDAQ. We've got a lot of transactions going on, and prices are changing moment by moment, right? If you've ever been involved in a bidding war and you're sure you're going to win, you're going as fast as you can, and this other guy keeps raising the price, and you're going and you're going and you're going, the prices change really fast. It's very exciting. In fact, I encourage all of you to do that every day. I'd love for all of you to bid every day. So anyway, it's a problem for search engines. They would love for our pages to be like any other store where the price just lays there, where the inventory is always in the same place and it's just like, static and kind of almost dead. They don't want inventory like eBay, where it's always changing. The price is going up. People are commenting on the pages. The inventory is coming and going very fast. It's a very exciting, dynamic site. Drives search engines crazy. So that's a challenge. All right. Now, so I told you about PageRank, right? So what is PageRank? PageRank is you got a link from this page forward to this page, and what does it tell you? It says this page values that page. So that's how PageRank works. A real important concept now on the internet, a recent thing on the internet, is trust. And here's how trust works. This page is receiving the link, right? So PageRank is moving this direction, but trust moves that direction. So even though the anchor is pointing in this direction, trust actually moves the other way. Because what did you just say? You said, hey, I value that page, I trust that page, and what if this page is a bad guy? It's malware, it's some sort of viruses, it's a phishing scheme, it's something like that, right? So trust moves backwards on these links. Now in our case, okay, so let's look at your website. On your website, who controls the links? Well, you do, right? You design the web page. You largely link within your own pages. Maybe you link to a couple other sites, but you really tightly control those links. eBay's different, right? We are a marketplace. We're working in collaboration with our sellers. We allow our sellers to create their content, and they're going to have some links in that content. There's some links that we discourage or we try to stop, but there's other links that are okay. And when they do that, some of these sellers are going to make mistakes, and they're going to link to dumb sites. They may not even realize they've really done it. So trust at eBay is tricky because it's a partnership. We don't have full control. We do it with our sellers. And who are our sellers? So before the talk, I kind of walked around, and some of you worked for big companies that sell at eBay, and some of you are private sellers. You're selling stuff when it's convenient. So eBay is an interesting collection of people. If you look at the number of sellers we have, most of them are individuals, right? They're part-time sellers. Maybe they're amateur sellers. It's not their full-time job. It's just that every once in a while they go and they find something really cool, or they get a bargain and they put it up on eBay. I've met people that I met this great gal once on a tram in New York City, and she walked on. She had the coolest shoes you've ever seen, and I commented on them because I'm funny. I like talking to strangers. So I said, "You've got really cool shoes." And we started talking, and it turns out she got them on eBay. I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." And she explained that she's crazy passionate about shoes. And she's got this job that she has to go to every day because that pays the bills. But what she really loves is finding a great pair of shoes. And then she often will get, if she gets a good deal, 2 of them and sell one on eBay. And that pays for her habit. She said her house is full of shoes. She's got shoe boxes everywhere. So, she's one of these amateur sellers. She doesn't think really hard about selling. She wants it to go well. She does her best when she puts it up. But if you ask her to optimize the SEO of her listing, that's unreasonable, right? So that's really my job. When you look at the stuff that's selling, the big sales on eBay, it's a lot of brand new stuff from full-blown companies that have warehouses and inventory and lots of employees. They're selling a lot of stuff, right? So we have this nice mixture. Now, those companies, they're a little more open to us talking to them about SEO, but I need to deal with the fact that a lot of our items are from these sellers that, okay, this isn't their full-time job. All right, so how does eBay approach SEO? Well, the best place to start is probably the same place that everybody should start, right? It's kind of the first aid of SEO. First thing you want to do is, stop the bleeding. And if you go and you buy a book about SEO, there's going to be some common sense tips that are really useful. And that's the same place we start. We look at things like the text of our titles. We look at things like the meta tags that are describing the page. We look at the structure of the page. And all of these things are kind of SEO 101. So we start with those. That's a great place to start. But you have to remember, eBay is an old site. We've been around for a long time. And we're a pretty big company. So most people, when they're working for a software company, are devoted to adding a feature. They figure that's what I do. It's my job to come up with some new great feature. And they work really hard, and they've got a team, and they ship the feature, and that's all great. And then, people move on. They change from one team to another. And pretty soon, if you've got a big website like us, and it's been up for a very long time, you've got parts of the site that were, at one point, they were the most beautiful thing on the whole site to a team, right? They'd stayed up all night working on it. They were devoted to it. They had lots of meetings about it. But they've moved on, and now nobody really owns it. So you got this stuff that, okay, maybe it doesn't work very well. Or maybe there just isn't any love for that site. Or maybe there's no one who's thinking about that feature anymore. So one of the things that we do after kind of the bare bones first aid is we go looking at the site. Is there stuff we can just turn off? Is there stuff that's not being actively improved every day? I think that helps with SEO. Then you got kind of the other side of it, right? So you've got people, they're all excited, they're going to do a new feature, and they make the new feature, and they totally forget how do you get to the feature, right? Their feature becomes an island. eBay's a great big site, but that doesn't mean that you can get to everything from everywhere. And so the other thing I have to look after is, all right, who's working on new stuff, and have you considered how this is going to work? How are we going to get there? How are they going to discover it? What's a search engine going to find interesting about your page? So we do a lot of that. So those are kind of the basics of SEO. And in some ways, they don't change. But the reality of SEO is the marketplace is ever changing. The search engines are constantly releasing new versions of their stuff. Google releases a new version of their search engine about every 2 weeks. There's not major changes every 2 weeks, but it's always churning. Bing has about the same kind of schedule. And there's all kinds of other stuff that's changing, like how people are linking to you, or how important a social networking site is, or where's your traffic coming from, or are you running an ad campaign on television? There's all kinds of stuff that's always, always changing. And so it's best to be grounded in some sort of philosophy, some understanding, some way to think about the page that's useful. And as we've been thinking about it, what I've come around to is that the goal of the search engines is to simulate a person. That's really what they're trying to do. And that's a tough problem. So they have to look at, they've got this little bot that's going and making a copy of your web page, and then they're looking at the web page trying to figure out what does it mean. That's a hard problem. And basically they're trying to figure out not just what does it mean, but what would a person seeing the web page notice? Where's the content that's valuable to the person, and why is it valuable? What does it relate to? And all of these things are basically the same idea. They're trying to simulate the person. And as you take this kind of approach, I think it's really useful, because it kind of removes one of the big problems I notice in SEO, which is that most people think of SEO as a bag of tricks. It's like, oh, what's the magic formula to move up in the ranking? If I just put this word here or that word there, or, if I just make this blue or red or whatever, then suddenly, boom, I'm at the top of the rankings. And even when you maybe accidentally find something that works like that, the fact of the matter is, after a couple weeks, that effect goes away. One of the big dangers of say, SEO consultants is that there are many different ranking factors that are in these search engines. Some of them are really short-term. So like you make a change that affects one of these short-term ranking functions, boom, you can pop right up. That's great. And the consultant better get out of town, because there's some long-term ranking functions that eventually hit. And guess what? All that magic goes away, right? I don't know, maybe if any of you are SEO consultants, I apologize, because it's a very difficult job. But one of the things that I've noticed is this fascinating effect that, like, I can make a change and boom, like within 4 days, it's like magic. It's all of a sudden everything's better. And then, say 28 days, 30 days later, the effect seems to go away. And that's because there's many different ranking functions. All right. So if instead of trying to treat SEO as a bag of tricks, if I start to think of it with a little backup, think of it more philosophically, okay, they're trying to simulate a person. I seem to get better results. I get better long-term results. I get sustainable results. So one of the other things that we do is we test. We test like crazy. And the frustrating thing about web frameworks for testing, and maybe if you have a fairly large website, hopefully your testing changes as you make them. Often the way you set up the test excludes the bots. So what have you done? So you've made a change that's super important, but you've made it invisible to the search engines. And maybe you've made it in such a way that people that are searching for your stuff, not only does the bot not see those pages, but if someone gets lucky and they happen to land on your page, maybe they get into the test and maybe they don't. It's hard to say. So eBay's got a fantastic testing platform. And one of the holes I noticed in the system was that we carefully excluded the bots. And so you would get these weird results like, oh, this change is fantastic. It's doing all this great stuff for us. And you release it. And so now the whole world can see it. And guess what? Finally, the bots can see it. And so the bots go look at it. And they're like, this sucks. This isn't good at all. Send no traffic to that page. And so the fact of the matter is, once people could get to the page, it sucks. And you don't get the business results you want. Now, you could get lucky. And you could guess wrong. And, the bots could love it even more. And it could get better. That never seems to happen. But your testing framework is super important. Now, once you've got a way of doing a test that actually involves the bots and involves certain people coming from search, then you have to decide, well, what is it that I want to test? What is my goal? And almost everybody comes up with ranking. Ranking is my goal. That's a really kind of simple, and it's a good initial place to start. It's really hard. I mean, it seems like that's the goal you should want, but that's really hard. In our case, one of my big concerns is coverage. So I've got 60, 70 million items on the site at any one time. How many of those items can you find on search engines? Are search engines able to get to that stuff? So I do tests for things like, can the bot get to these pages? Is the bot getting to these pages? How often is the bot getting to these pages? All those kinds of tests. And then you can look at other things like core functions that the search engines talk about as being important to them, like bounce rate. So bounce rate's really simple. You click on the search result, you get a page. You look at the page and you say, nope, and you go right back to the search results, right? And people are amazing. We're just fantastic at figuring out this is the wrong page. We do it in less than a second, a fraction of a second. So boom, page comes up, nope, back we go. That's a bounce. And that's a really bad thing for that page. Because remember, what's the search engine trying to do? It's trying to simulate a human being. And lo and behold, it doesn't have to simulate a human being. It's got one. It's got its own little test human being. And that little test human being, he's going to go to that page, and he's going to read the content, and he's going to judge it based on what he put in to search on. That's beautiful. It's kind of, when you're doing a simulation, you have to have truth. Boom, all of a sudden they've got truth. And what did it say? If your bounce rate is high, it said to the search engine, this page is not what they wanted. And so you're going to drop. So we do lots and lots of tests. Okay. The other thing that we look at really hard is how clear is the page to the bot. So we have lots of great engineers, and they're working really hard. They're doing things like trying to make the page faster. And we've got lots of designers, and they're working really hard, and they're trying to make the pages more engaging. And it's very easy to be kind of working single-mindedly on those two goals and lose sight of the fact that you may be doing things that make it really hard for the bot to understand your page. Maybe you've obfuscated your JavaScript, and so that's important JavaScript for it to run, or maybe the JavaScript is a little too complicated, a little funny, and so it can't really use what it's supposed to do, or if somehow you've confused the bot. You've made it hard. And so one of the things that we try to do is figure out how can we simplify the page and make it easy for the bot to understand. Generally, that helps people, too. I mean, although people aren't actually reading the HTML, when the HTML is simpler, the design tends to be simpler. It tends to be easier to understand. You can find the stuff you want. And let me tell you, when you're dealing with accessibility, like say, someone who has a vision impairment or a motion impairment, simplifying the HTML does wonders for them. So there's lots of benefits to doing that, one of which happens to be SEO. We had an incident at eBay where we got real excited about ways of doing different navigation within our search pages. So you could do things like, say, you go look up at men's shirts. This is great. Okay, and then off to the side you can say, well, I want this brand, and I want this size, and I want this fabric, and I want short sleeves, and isn't that great? And your search results got simpler, more direct. Wonderful. So what did the bot do? Bots now run JavaScript, and all that navigation is based on JavaScript. So what did they do? They chose every single box over and over and over again. Every single combination of every single box. Every single color, every single fabric, every single shirt length, every single brand, every single size, and every combination of every single size. It was a combinatorial explosion. We had one page, the bot was just slamming like crazy, 46,000 times a day. It must have thought this shirt was the greatest shirt ever, right? It's just diving in. And so meanwhile, there's 45,999 other shirts that it doesn't even look at, right? So that's a problem. And if you don't study the bot, you're not going to see that stuff. You wonder why you're not doing well. Your coverage is going down. Why is that? All right, so that's what this is all about. You have to, let's imagine you're running your own little store. And you decide, we're going to pay no attention to the customers. My mom used to own a company. And she used to tell me, John, the best thing about customers is if you ignore them, they'll just go away. And you need to think of the bot as your most important customer. Because these bots are the doorway to everybody else on the internet. I mean, no matter how big eBay is, there's always more people who aren't on eBay than are on eBay. And so the bot isn't something I should casually think about. It's something I should study. I should know what pages does it go to. I should know how often does it show up. I should figure out, well, how does it move from one page to another? I should look at, is it getting stuck? And if it starts to get stuck, I should have a report that just goes off like an alarm. 46,000 times it's hit this page. That should be something that pages me. So, really studying the bot is important. The funny thing is that a lot of companies filter the bots out of their logs. Because, that's not interesting data. I don't want to know what the bot's doing. I want to know what the buyers are doing. And really, you need to kind of think of it the other way around. Or maybe segment those logs off separately. It's like, this is where we study the bot. One of the things that I've also gone after is, there's many different kinds of searches. So it used to be everything was text search. But one of the areas I find really interesting is image search. eBay has fantastic images of all kinds of stuff. If your kid needs to do a paper about lawnmowers, eBay's a great place to find pictures of lawnmowers or almost anything else. Edison gramophones, great. We've got great pictures of all that stuff. We should be showing up in image search. And so you start thinking about all the different kinds of searches that are available, and it expands constantly, right? Where am I in all those different searches? How am I doing? Are those kinds of bots, are they finding my stuff? Am I doing anything that's confusing the bot or interrupting it? One of the things that I was concerned about recently was, when we have some sort of system issue, are we accurately communicating to the bot that this is a temporary problem, come back? And so status codes that you're giving when you're talking to a bot as opposed to a human can also be important. You don't want to confuse the bot. All right. One of the funny things I've noticed about SEO is that people seem to believe that SEO is somehow at odds with good design. It's like, well, I can either have a great-looking web page or I can have a great SEO-performing web page. And that's not true. If both of you, your designer and the person who's helping out with SEO, keep in mind that the bot is trying to simulate a human being, they can work together beautifully. One of the things that I think is useful is you've got a web page, step back like about 6 feet from the screen. And if you've got one of those really big screens, step back even farther. And look at your screen and say, what can I see? Is it clear what the H1 is, what the top header is for the page? Is it clear what the main sections are? Can I see where the call to action is and what it is? That's not what a bot does, but it helps you kind of back away. There's lots of detail you can't see. If you can't see the stuff that's important from that distance from your monitor, the bot's probably going to miss it too. The detail's not there, the design's not there. And then I really believe that these two things can work really lovely together. In general, like I said, simplifying the page to make it easy for people to understand and the bot to find the data generally makes for better design. All right, I was worried we didn't have any bullet points, so I threw some in. I figured, you're coming to the conference, you really look for bullet points. Here's some bullet points for you. So SEO isn't a bag of tricks. It's an ever-changing environment. If I happen to give this talk next year and you happen to come back, the talk's going to be all different. We're going to talk about all kinds of different things because SEO is ever-changing. We attend conferences 3 or 4 times a year about SEO just so we can hear what are the search engines doing, even though we've got all this great data, right? Because everything's always changing. Keep in mind, search engines are trying to simulate people. I think that's a great way to kind of guide the SEO work you do. Remember that PageRank moves with the link, but super important, trust moves backwards. And so you need to look at what are we linking to, or if we have user-generated content, what are they linking to, and how can we manage that or control that. You want to make sure all of your tests, especially your SEO tests, are visible to the bots and also visible to real people trying to search the web. That's kind of tricky. So one of the things that I might do is take a section of the site and change that whole section and just make it completely public. And I'm not risking a lot of business because it's not a huge part of the site, but it's fully visible to the bots. They get a chance to get in there, try it out. They get a chance to index it, put it on search, and I get a chance to go and look to see, well, how are these pages doing? And like I said, great UI is complementary to SEO design. All right? So that's it. We're going to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions if you have any questions. I'll try to come up with the right answer. And there's a question over here. Actually, there's a few. We're right there, I guess.
So Google also has Google real-time search. How does this, because that is what your problem is, right? Making your contents visible on real-time basis. And Google also has this real-time search where they're actually browsing news sources and the sites that are changing very fast, like forums and eBay and all.
Yeah.
So how do the two come together?
That's a great question. So Google's kind of got two different ways of doing indexing. They have kind of the slow, most of the internet indexing, and then they've got this other system that's really fast. I kind of think of it as like cache in your computer, right? So that's something where we do provide data feeds to Google. Although like Twitter is a lot of data, we are a huge amount of data. And so one of the problems we have to deal with first and foremost is we need to figure out what are the most relevant items, right? I think we have like 40,000 iPods on the site at any one time, right? So do we really want to just serve iPod after iPod after iPod? They're all basically the same price, or so we've got those kinds of issues. We do provide RSS feeds and other data feeds to any search engine that's interested in them to help out our sellers.
Today, how capable are the bots understanding data that's put in via AJAX? That's my first question. Second question is, what percentage of all the traffic is organic on eBay today?
Okay. So they won't tell us how good they are at running JavaScript. We know they can run JavaScript. We know that Google has a fantastic JavaScript engine in Chrome that you can run on the same machines that they use for indexing the site, so they could potentially use that. So it's kind of unclear. The other problem is that it doesn't run it necessarily the same moment that it's on the page. So what Google can do is harvest the page and all the related documents and then run them independently. And so there can be perhaps some problems where, because the JavaScript's running at a completely different time than when the page was generated, that leads to problems. It's really not, I can't answer the question directly. I'm not sure. It's complicated. One of the things that I try to do is make sure that the most important elements of the page aren't dependent upon JavaScript, right? And you can't always do that, so then you just try to make sure the JavaScript is clean and it runs really well, say, in Chrome. Right, because at least that's the Chrome and IE, right? Because those are the JavaScript engines both companies are most familiar with. Probably a good idea. Okay.
Organic traffic.
Oh, organic traffic. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I could tell you that. And we measure it in many different ways. So there's traffic that we get because people. Like my grandma goes to Yahoo, and she knows Yahoo is the internet, right? And so she goes to Yahoo, and she goes to the search box, and she types in eBay, and she hits enter, and then eventually she gets to eBay, right? So what does that count as? Is that really a search, or is that navigation? There's all those kinds of things. And so it kind of muddies the water. And it's a really important part of our business. So if I screw it up and we see like the bots get confused and the pages are in trouble, it would hurt our bottom line. We would notice it. I would get a call. I would be in trouble. So.
Hi, I would like to know what would you recommend as a best practice for content that is no longer available as a personalized 404, or redirecting that to a different page, or eliminating it from a sitemap when a product's sold and that positioning is already achieved, what to do with it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting problem. So let me give you an example of a guy. So there's a gentleman, I forget where he was from. He was selling his wetsuit on eBay. And he mentioned that as a great feature of this particular wetsuit, it had never been peed in. And this got somehow picked up. You know how things on the internet get picked up. This got picked up, and pretty soon it's on Facebook, and it's on Twitter, and it's in the news, and this guy's getting interviewed. And this thing just goes nuts. So we get, I don't know, 1 million hits on this page. Everybody, and you can leave comments, and there's like women asking to marry him. You know, the page just goes crazy. Well, that item eventually ends. You know, it sells or doesn't sell. I think it was up to, I don't remember, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars was the bid on this item or something. It was crazy. It eventually ends, right? And so you have to ask yourself the question, is a suit that you can't buy anymore still a useful search result? And in fact, in this case, it is. Because there's all these blog posts pointing at that page. There's all these Facebook links pointing to the page. There's Twitter stuff pointing to the page. There's news stories about it. I mean, it would be really frustrating if you're reading this blog about funny things that happen on the internet, or Bob's stories about websuits, and you're going along reading the story, you're like, oh, I want to see that page. You click on it, and it's gone, right? So we're going to treat those things separately. And, eBay's got lots of really cool stuff. We've got like Tron motorcycles that are cool. We've got like people that built the entire Batmobile out of Legos in real scale, all those kind of really cool things. So those pages we kind of keep separately. I think those pages should be around forever because I think they're part of our culture. Maybe a small, weird part of our culture in some cases, but they're part of our culture. All right. So, but then what do you do about, like, say, one of the 40,000 iPods that's sold? What do you do with that page? So we do keep the page around for a while for a couple of reasons. One is if the buyer and the seller have some sort, like if you're the buyer and you get it and you're like, wait a minute, I thought it said that it was going to come with a complete car stereo system. And you go and you look back on the page, we just keep it around just so you can do stuff like that. And then after a while, we eventually do 404 it. But then there's other interesting cases, like, say, let's say you've got a really cool Rolex watch, like a Submariner watch. Do you remember the news story earlier this year about this old guy? He was in Vietnam, and on leave, he went and bought this watch. And he wore it for many years, and he kind of just forgot about it, kept it in a drawer. He put it up on eBay. I think he wanted $5 for the watch. It went for like $5,000 because it was the watch that James Bond wore, and they only made 100 of them in the whole world, and he happened to be one of the guys that accidentally bought one. All right, so where was I going with that? So let's imagine that he didn't sell it, right? So it was going along, and something happened, like somebody bid on it, and they were just screwing around. Sometimes the wetsuit guy, the $1 million bid, they were just screwing around, right? So he needed to relist the wetsuit. So in that case, what we want to do, we want to make sure that we 301, which is to tell the bots, this has been moved permanently to this other page, and do things like that. And that gets really complicated because it depends on the seller's activity. It's sometimes hard for us to determine that this is a new listing or not. One of the things that we've done recently, if you're a seller, especially electronics, one of you was selling electronics, you can list against our catalog on eBay. And that's a really nice thing because then you're going to end up on what we call our product details page, and those stay still. So if you want to know about this particular model of iPod, you can always go to that page for the next, however many years, and you're going to be able to get all of those iPods that we currently have. That's really useful for you in terms of SEO. Those pages can actually develop PageRank over time much better than our regular pages. So.
Question
All right,
here.
last question.
Hi, there are several multilingual sites out there that display content in English and in Spanish.
Right.
They use software that translates. Some sites use the software that translated from English to Spanish. Some sites just have the content in English and in Spanish separated. What works best for these bots?
That's a great question. In our case, we have sites in many different countries where, say, Spanish is the local native language. So we have this interesting opportunity where we can say like the U.S. site isn't normally in Spanish, but the Mexican site is. And so like all the UI and everything by default. So the bot, when it lands on the page, it's going to get Mexican or Spanish by default. When it lands on the U.S. site, it's going to get English by default. So we have an opportunity there where we can say, okay, all the UI is going to be in Spanish. We're going to tell the bot, this is the Spanish language version of the page, and there's a way you can do that in your meta tags. And then we can say, but the canonical version of the page is actually over here, right? Because the listing maybe was in the US but available in Mexico, things like that. Now, the problem is, if we go to try to translate what the seller actually wrote, then we end up having to use machine translation, which is okay. I mean, I think we've all been to websites that obviously use machine translation, or maybe you've gotten those, a set of chopsticks at a Chinese restaurant and you read the text and clearly it's not translated by somebody that really knows English. You don't want that experience. That's kind of a weird experience, but at least that way we can help people get to stuff. So the short answer is that I'm not sure what the right thing is to do about the content that the seller provided us. But by using the meta tags, we can provide a nice place for someone who speaks Spanish to get to a site that they understand, that it's clear to them, when they click on things, what it means. All the rest of the site mechanics are in the language of their choice. But it's an interesting problem for us to solve because cross-border trade is a huge business for us. If you sell on eBay, I highly recommend you try allowing shipment all over the world, because you might be able to get an iPhone. You might be able to sell an iPhone in the U.S. for about retail price, but if you're willing to ship it to other parts of the world, you could get 3 or 4 times the price. I mean, you can make a lot of money by being someone willing to take on the extra burden of shipping internationally. The meta tag is useful, and so there's 2 meta tags in particular that are interesting. One is that where you say this is the language of the content, or this is the page that's for this language, but the canonical source, language independent source, is this other page. So you can find documentation on that, say in Google Webmaster Tools or on Bing. All right. Hey, thank you all very much. I hope you had a great time. And they asked me to point this out, that you can go to XDev Camp for hands-on instruction. If you're an engineer and you want to talk to engineers about how to do this stuff, that's the place to go. Great opportunity for you. Thank you all for coming.